When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, Hello and a warm welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave, and today I have a very interesting guest for you whose name is Barbara With. And Barbara is an international peace activist, award-winning author, psychic channel, composer and performer, workshop facilitator, and inspirational speaker. She is the co-founder of Conflict Revolution, a revolutionary way to resolve conflicts of the psyche based on her work channeling Albert Einstein. She has also authored 6 books. And Barbara, are there any of the things or accolades that I have missed? And also, welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast.
No, I think that was a gracious plenty, Todd. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm very interested to talk to you today because some of the things that you deal with are things that I'm kind of interested in as well myself, and also to learn more. So let's start basically, I guess you can say from the top. So when did you first know that you were a psychic?
I actually started channeling in 1987, but I was a musician for many, many years. I started writing music when I was 12 or 13. And that process of writing music where you sort of go into the nothing and pick out words and melody and chord structures and then bring them through to have a tangible product was setting me up for be able to then do what I do now. And I didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a psychic. I was actually in high school when my friend Mike said, "Hey, you got to see what my mom does." I was like, "What does your mom do?" And his mom was a psychic, and she would close her eyes. She had this beautiful picture of Jesus behind her and always lit a candle, and she would close her eyes and talk in this strange voice. But everything that she said to me was so loving, and it was all, not all, she did predictions that came true, but it was really about how to love myself and how to heal myself from this deep childhood trauma that I had been through. So I knew what channeling was, but in 1987, I was typing this letter to my friend, and I was being just a jerk. I was like wagging my finger at her, telling how bad it was to make judgments without one clue of how judgmental I was being. And suddenly there was this shift kind of in energy, and my hand started to type words that I wasn't thinking. So they were saying, yes, because when you make judgments, like the lens of an eye, it closes down, so all you see is a very small part of the whole. And I knew I hadn't typed that. I knew that wasn't what I was thinking or feeling. But since I knew what channeling was, I went with it. And I said, "Well, so who are you?" And they said, "We are sound." And being a musician, and I started playing piano when I was 4 or 5, I just went with it. I just accepted that, okay, I can get that. There's a lot of sound out there. And so that's how I started channeling. And I ended up doing a couple of readings for 2 of my dear friends and said, if it helps you, pass it on. And I ended up becoming a professional reader. So that's kind of how I started.
Okay, that's interesting. So when you were communicating, because one, I think it's highly likely to say that you were communicating with a higher level of consciousness at the time. Did it feel like it was some sort of energy coming into your body, or what kind of feeling was it at the time when you were doing it? Because the reason why I asked is that my followers, I tell them that I call it the voice. So in my situation, I call it the voice because there's this loud voice that comes inside of me and literally stops me from doing what I'm doing. And that normally happens when it's at the point where I'm not listening. And it's like, okay, you're not listening, Todd. You're being very stubborn. So we're going to tell you, right? For me, that is like very, very distinct. So you said that this is many years ago in 1987. So like, was it some sort of like a feeling that you had, or is it just completely like foreign, just going with it? There was no sort of experience that you were having per se.
When I started, I would write. So people would come over and they'd sit here to my left, and I would just write. And it didn't actually feel much like anything, except I was kind of observing what was being said while it was being written. But there came a point where I thought, I need to be able to speak this like my mentor did. And so I was at a party one day and I just said, hey, you guys, I have this experiment I want to do. I've never done this before, channeling, blah, blah. And there was one guy that was really like cynical. And I said, you know what? You don't have to believe anything I'm saying, but just don't ridicule me while I'm doing it, because this is all new to me. And in that case, what it felt like was I closed my eyes and it felt like kind of this space inside me opened up, and there was this energy that was coming from the floor up and up through me. And I felt like it sort of was like this column of energy. And I felt like I was sort of sitting over to the side, observing it. And then it wasn't like I heard or saw, it just like I became the voice. And then I spoke for an hour or so, and I opened my eyes at the end and people were crying and I had no idea what I had said. So it began that way. But then as I developed this further through speaking, then sometimes I would hear a voice in my right ear telling me stuff that was going to happen. I met these two women. I wanted to do group channeling, and I'd met these two women and they sent their friends, and I was driving down the highway one day and I heard this voice say, you're going to teach them to channel. And I argued. It's like, I'm not going to teach I don't even know. How would I do that? I don't know how to teach you to channel. And I'm not a teacher. I'm very impatient. No, you're going to teach them to channel. And so it comes in different ways. Sometimes when I'm in a reading, it's almost like, you know, the kind of the moving language on a sign, like in Times Square, there's kind of, you know, the stock market or whatever. Sometimes I see that. Sometimes I see pictures that then are described. And now here in 2024, after I've been doing this for decades, it's pretty seamless to me. And if you listen to my old channeling voice and my new channeling voice, my newer channeling voice sounds like me speaking very eloquently. And when I first started speaking, it was had this thick accent, and it was heavy and hard to, you know, wordy. So it's kind of evolved through the years.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's akin to now about an outer body experience, because you said that you were like to the side and you could see it. So like when you were having this experience, like how did it feel? Because you're actually seeing yourself as you're the observer, and your physical self is being observed, which kind of ties into quantum physics here, and quantum entanglement and all that stuff. So how was that like experience? Because like for some people it really scares them and they tend to shy away from these kind of talents. So like how was that experience for you, like actually having that in a moment and then realizing that that's actually what happened?
It was actually like being in two places at once. It was like there was this ego mind of mine that was observing the whole thing, but then it felt like me. But I knew it wasn't me. I knew this bigger part with all this profound, insightful knowledge wasn't exactly me. And so it was kind of that dual thing. And it is confusing and it can be frightening because, you know, the Bible has a whole bunch of stuff about don't do this, and, you know, there's superstitions about talking with people who've passed on, etc. But I never felt I was in danger of being like overtaken by some evil spirit or, yeah. So it kind of felt simultaneous, actually, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And I find that like when you have these kind of experiences, like for me, most of those experiences have come when I was sleeping. So I would have, or through psychedelics. So I would have that experience in a either altered state or when I'm actually in the spirit realm, but not actually like when I'm in the when I'm consciously in the physical realm, and then this thing started to happen to me. I just get like a voice, and it's my own voice, and it's very, very loud, you know.
But it's your own voice, so it has it sounds like your voice.
Yes, it very much sounds like my voice. It's very clear and distinct. Sometimes I have a full-blown conversation with myself in my head, and when it first started to happen to me, I actually asked myself, I was actually standing in front of a mirror. So obviously that actually like heightens the whole experience. And I asked myself, is this real? And then the voice said to me, well, what is real? You know? So it put me going further down this sort of like mental rabbit hole of myself. And it was kind of very interesting. So, you know, this is very cool to hear. So like, so have you ever done like psychedelics or anything like that?
Yes, I did quite a few psychedelics when I was young, all those many years ago, me and the dinosaurs.
Okay, so how does that experience compare to like what you do know with challenge, or is it basically the same thing because you're going into the spiritual realm, as I call it?
I think that the psychedelics of today, fortunately, are much more geared to having spiritual experiences, you know, ayahuasca or whatever it all is. It's all about seeking a spirit. Back in the day, it wasn't. It was it was completely recreational. But what it did for me, it is that it loosened up my hold on what I thought reality was, because reality would shift quite noticeably before me, and I would have these visions or these experiences where I was flung completely out into the universe and was not in a body anymore. I was just the whole universe. And so I felt like I could feel the planets and the stars and then all the people on the planet. And so those kinds of experiences, I think, even though they weren't like, I'm going to sit down and do this to have a spiritual experience, they ended up showing me kind of in my body what that spiritual experience feels like, to be one with everything.
You know, so being that you're able to enter the spirit world, what is it like? Because for most people that have like never done psychedelics or been having these abilities, how can you explain to people kind of like a layman, a person that's completely oblivious to this kind of genre of information? Can you explain to them what it is actually like in that realm? Like, is it like how religion describes where it's all white lights and all that kind of stuff? So how can you explain to them what it is like so that they can, because it's hard to express these things with words, but being that you enter that world so frequently, is there anything that you can like explain to people, seeing now that we're going through this ascension process on Earth, that a lot of people are going to start to have these sort of experiences, and so that you can give them comfort that they're not mad, is nothing to be afraid of, and how can they be able to cope with it? So can you explain a little bit about what it's like in that sort of realm?
Absolutely. It's very much like the imagination. And what Einstein has told us is that in our intellect, We have this power of imagining, and that's part of creating the physical reality at its root. But also, if you just get to everyday imagining, you can be sitting there and you can be imagining that you're at the beach, or you can be imagining that you're somewhere, or and in the bad sense, you can be imagining that something terrible is going to happen. And where does that take place? It takes place in a place that isn't even physical. It doesn't even really have a location short of your head, but it's an energy. It's what we call a non-physical energy. So if somebody who had never done this before, what I would tell them to do is go get into a quiet place, lie down, get relaxed, and then close your eyes and turn inward, kind of don't focus on what's physical, and explore that imagination. And what are you imagining? Imagine you're talking to Jesus. What is Jesus saying? Listen to what you're hearing. Be observant of what's happening in your imagination. And it very much feels to me like my imagination. Every single time I do it, I have this little ego voice that I kind of shrink down, and it's like, oh, you can't say that. You're just imagining it. But the proof is then in what is said. So in the beginning, I would have some fits and starts where it really just was my ego wanting something to be, and I would get a kind of a hard slap about that, in realizing that that really wasn't a spiritual thing. That was me trying to be something. And so then I would have to kind of let go again. But I think if I had to describe it that way, in a way that everyone can understand, that's kind of how it feels.
I find, like, because I've been doing like meditation for quite a few years now, and my spiritual awakening was very, very hard. And I got into meditation as a way to cope. And what's happened in terms of my meditations now is that I actually talk to myself. And there's a very small point, where it feels like if I am inventing the answers to suit what I want to hear. But then what happens for me is that after that initial period, it goes deeper, where like I start to say things to myself in a meditative state that I wouldn't have really have thought about, or wanted to say, or want to accept. And I guess for listeners, excuse me, I share that because it is kind of like that, where in the beginning it can feel like if you're just imagining all of this and you're giving yourself answers that suit your belief system. But then as you continue to do it and have the conversation, there gets a point where you actually forget that you were actually trying to confirm your narrative. And then you start hearing things that you possibly didn't want to hear. And then you start to tap into this thing where, because what's happened to me is that sometimes I would get into that state, and especially in the beginning, and I'd be like, whoa, this can't be real. And then it would come out, and then I wouldn't be able to get back into it, because it is really, I find it kind of difficult to stay in that state. So like, how are you able to stay in that state for like a period of time? Because I find it still challenging to stay in there, because this is one of the things that people message me a lot and say, but how do I stay in a meditative state? I can only meditate for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Like, it's kind of hard to quell the mind. So any little tips or things that you can share to help to maintain that connection while you're there?
Well, I think of it as being a marathon runner. So when we start out, we don't run 26 miles. We can't run 26 miles, no matter how hard we try. We have to run 1 mile, and then we have to run 2 miles, and then we have to run 3 miles. So it's a process in that way. Meditation, I think that the more that you can just increase a few minutes, increase a little while, and then push yourself to understand that why can't you stay in a meditative state more than 10 minutes? What happens? Is it your thoughts? Is it a body feeling? Is it an emotional thing? Because then you can pay attention to those distractions to be able to kind of stay there. And as far as the meditative state, I think a lot of people imagine that if they're not just completely have an empty mind and a huge heart, that they're doing it wrong. But that isn't it. It really is about constantly quieting the fluctuations of the mind, because they're going to rise up and then you're going to quiet them again. And for me, having done channeling for all of this time, for me to channel for an hour would be like a marathon runner running 5 miles. You know, you can go whip off the 5 miles and you still got energy to spare.
Wow. So how long can you actually stay in that state for?
I think the longest I've channeled has been about 3 hours.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it gets long about hour 2:45. It gets a little tiring, and I don't do that often, but it's pretty easy for me to be in a channeled state for an hour and a half or two.
Okay, interesting. So you are part of the psychic sorority. What is that, and how did that come about?
When I was first channeling, I channeled for about 5 years, and people would come and go, and we'd record it, and they'd go off and come back. And I never really had much of a conversation with anybody. They just came and went. And in 1993, I thought, what would happen if I channeled for a group of people? What would this voice say to many people at once? Because it's the voice of we. It was always we this, we that. And I thought of myself like my mentor. She said she was like an antenna. She wasn't channeling entities or anybody. She was just picking up energy and reporting back to you, your higher power. So I sent out word to all my clients and no one was interested. And then Teresa came as a referral for a reading, and she sent a bunch of women friends, and then she sent her best friend, Kim. And Kim, when she had her reading, she took the tape home, she transcribed it, and she kept calling me back, asking me, well, what does this mean? Then they kept coming to my gigs, because I was a musician at the time, and we'd talk on my breaks. And somewhere along the way, at the same time, I had the thought, here's my group. And they were having a conversation. Maybe we should get all of our girlfriends together. We've had readings with Barbara and ask her to come over and channel. And so that's how I started doing groups. And we called ourselves the Psychic Sorority. And we ended up when Kim and Teresa asked, who are you? Because they wanted to know who was talking. The voice said, you can call us angels. And I was skeptical. I'm a naturally skeptical person. I think skepticism is very healthy. And the three of us had a conversation about, is it really angels? What does that mean? How does that work? And we concluded that as long as that information was so profound and changing our lives for the better, which it was, that we didn't care. We didn't care if it was angels or the Easter Bunny. If it was really bettering our lives and making us more wholer, richer, deeper, more loving, then it didn't matter to us. So we became the Psychic Sorority.
Now that's interesting that you all call they said the angels, because like I find in terms of like, because of my channel and what I talk about, I tend to get sometimes fundamentalist Christians coming after me, and they say that I am doing the work of the devil and I need to come back to religion and Jesus, etc., etc. So like in terms of like the angels, because from my research, because I'm quite knowledgeable in our ancient civilizations, the Anunnaki, and our ancient hidden history in terms of Sumerian tablets, etc. Now, the word angel actually was put into religion through the Anunnaki, from my research, as a way to sort of like advance their status. Now, what I would say is I think that we tend to get too hooked up on words. But what I would say is that how then, as a person that is a Christian or a religious person, because we have Abrahamic faiths, when you say angel, how can that be sort of like further broken down for them to understand, so that they don't think that this is some sort of devil worship that you do? Because I get that often, right? So like, how could you break down the angel term in a way that would be understandable for them? Because I think it's very much a matter of misconception and misunderstanding through the dogma of religion. So how would you explain it to them so that it kind of makes sense?
You know, I just had an appearance. I just did a short little appearance on Tucker Carlson. Okay, are you familiar with who Tucker Carlson is?
Oh yes, that's interesting.
Yeah. So a very controversial figure, and I won this chance to ask him a question, and they videotaped it. And my question was, do you believe in afterlife? And if you believe in afterlife, do you believe you can communicate with those who have passed on? Because Jesus came, died, rose from the dead, and then came back to his friends and family and had a conversation with them. They were talking to Jesus, who had died and rose and was now Holy Spirit. And with what Tucker said was, you know, I don't know the Bible that well, but I know we're not supposed to mess around with Ouija boards because you can get possessed and demonic. And I said, what did the prophets, how did the prophets in the Bible know it was God's voice? And he said, oh, well, God speaks to everyone. That's a fact. That's the fact. I said, I know, but given what you've just said about, you know, the devil sometimes disguises himself as an angel and there's all these traps, how did those prophets know it was God? And his answer was what my answer was, is you know them by their fruits. And what Tucker said was, if my pastor came to me and said, you got to beat your wife and throw your kids out on the street and, you know, do these things that are not good for you, and the fruits of what he's telling me to do are making chaos in my life and confusion and pain, then that's not of God. But if what we're being told is to love each other, to love ourselves, then that is from God. And that's kind of my answer to people is, and my answer to Tucker is that the voices that I speak came to give us a process for world peace, one person at a time, starting with ourselves, as a way to unite humanity under compassion. So if that's a devil, I'm flummoxed why the devil would want to make the world such a better place like I have. And I think it's a good way for people to measure.
Yes, that's a good answer. And it's very much in line with how I tend to explain to people that in these religious books, especially the Abrahamic faiths, there's actually more than one God. And the reason why I say that is that when you go back to these ancient texts, you realize that there were a group of deities called the Anunnaki that came here about 450,000 years ago. They installed all of these control systems of government, money, and religion. And what they did is that they elevated themselves to such a high level in our consciousness to make us think that they were God. And what it is now is that there are several terms like the Lord, God, and other titles that have been transliterated and translated when you go back to the ancient Hebrew and Greek. And one of those words is Lord. And the word Lord is actually a title. And they say to people that we have something in the UK called the House of Lords. Lord just means a title. Lord means master. Bel Marduk or Lord Marduk. Lord is Bel or Baal. Baal. He is one of the gods that is in the Bible. And we know that because when you go back to the Greek, the word Lord is written in capitals and it is written in a way that you can see it was put in there. It is not in the original text because theos is the Greek word that would be used for God. And what I say to people is that you don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but look at the fruit of what the quotation marks God is telling you to do. You have places in Deuteronomy, Numbers, Exodus, etc., where God is asking people to do very bad things. So how can you come and say that this God is good when he's telling you to go and rape, murder, and pillage? But then people say, but you don't understand. There was a reason. I said, but rape, murder, and pillage, whether it is for a good reason or a bad reason, the fruit or the attributes, the actions, the consequences are not good. So that can't be good. So there are messages in these books that are very good. But in order to understand which God it is, you look at the fruits, like what you're saying, like the energy, the attributes. If that God is telling you to be loving, kind, respectful, and forgive, then that's a message of goodness. But if you have rape, murder, and pillage, and genocide on one side, you have to ask yourself, is this really God? You know, because for people that are listening that are Christians, God, quotation marks, killed about 3 million people in the Bible. And Satan, supposedly, killed up to 10 people. And the only place where you find that death is in the story of Job. That's it. There are no other places. So he asks people, which God? Which is why I asked the question, like, you said angels, how can they sort of understand? But the long story short is you have to look at the attributes, the energy, and the fruit of the tree, you know?
Yes, exactly.
So how did you come to learn that you were channeling Albert Einstein?
Well, when we published our first book, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels, it was just our actual diaries of what we went through taking in this information and how it changed our lives. And also that these angels told us they had this revolutionary process that they had come up with, the angels, for humans to resolve conflicts inside themselves first. And the result, the byproduct would be world peace. And they needed humans having real conflicts to test this process on. And I mean, we were flummoxed, but eventually the three of us had our first conflict, and I went and got the transcript and I read it. If you're involved in a conflict, your root is within you. And that so revolutionized how we dealt with that particular conflict. And that was the beginning of developing, researching conflict revolution. So when we put our first book out, my literary agent got a call from a paranormal tabloid in London. And I forget what it's called. I thought it was called the Sunday Papers, but I don't remember exactly what the name of it was. But they were looking for an interview with Princess Diana from beyond the grave on the 1-year anniversary of her death. And I had never done such a thing. I mean, people would show themselves to me and ask me to give messages to their loved ones, but I'd never actually gone to a dead person and asked them if I could talk to them. But I thought, well, you know, let's see what happens. So I sat down and I typed the questions, typed the answers. And when I read it back, it was so profound, not only her relationship with Dodie and what happened that night and her children, and I could hear her voice in my ear, but her whole message was, if everyone who put flowers in front of the palace would work on world peace in this way, we could have world peace if everyone would do it. And I thought, well, that's, you know, really, I said to her in my head, you know, wow, that's brilliant. And she said, I know, but we're not in charge. So the tabloid flew me out to New York and spent 5 hours with me, and they didn't want it because it didn't have crap about Charles and Camilla. I'm sure that's why. But my agent and I made a list of people, well, what other famous dead people might want to talk. And some of them did, and some of them didn't. And when we got to John Kennedy, we did John Kennedy, fascinating. And he said to us, okay, throw your list away. We are going to tell you who's coming up next, because we have already been working in afterlife for world peace. And we want you to publish our statements. And so that's when Albert Einstein came up. And he wasn't even on the original list. I mean, who doesn't love Albert Einstein? But I wasn't like any kind of Albert Einstein freak or anything. But when I channeled him through speaking. And this was the voice of all of my channeling. it not only resonated in my body, but it was like, holy smokes, are you telling me these angels have really been Albert Einstein? And it was kind of delightfully shocking. And what he said was really profound. I mean, he had all these things about, ADHD is actually a disease of the parents, because in a real natural world, those kids would be running around like crazy outside and, helping mom clean the buffalo and whatever. But now we make them sit in little desks, and so that adults can control them, and a bunch of other things. But in 2005, it was 100-year anniversary of E equals MC squared. And I thought, I should just channel a little tribute to Einstein, so I channeled a bunch of sessions and I went to edit them. And what he did was he delivered a unified field theory, something he couldn't do in life, that had this map of human consciousness and how human consciousness is essential for the creation of the physical world. Otherwise, it's just math. But you need that human consciousness to interact with that potential to be able to project and perceive the physical world. But the most profound was he defined compassion with a capital C in a scientific, quantifiable way. And he said it's the fifth fundamental force of the universe. It is the intelligence that uses the other four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. And so that was pretty mind-bending, and talk about, it makes you kind of go crazy that, I don't know anything about science. So I was saying to him and to myself, I have to go out and tell people that the source of everything is in the center of the earth, and it's a black hole. Am I going to be just a foolish person laughed off the stage? Is that even possible? And years later, it's really turned out to be quite possible, in fact. So that's how I got to Albert.
That's interesting. So let's stay a little bit on science for a minute. Have you heard of Nikola Tesla?
Yeah.
Okay. Because in the scientific field, one can argue that Nikola Tesla has changed humanity much more than Albert Einstein has, because basically 90% of all of his patents are what are used to create our technological society that we have now. So have you come across him during your channeling? And if so, like, what has he communicated to you, if you have?
I have not. But I should, and I will, now that you say this. He hasn't come through. I haven't thought of it, but I'm very familiar with who he is. I don't know, like I said, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know a lot about the specifics of his work, except that, like what you said, he's influenced it. And then, of course, didn't he die sort of penniless? And
yes, that is a very interesting story, because Tesla basically, he understood the unified field, and he understood the etheric realm, so much so that he created a device that could tap into the etheric realm and create electricity for the entire planet for free. Now, he was actually getting sponsorship money from the Rockefeller Foundation. What happened is that when Rockefeller found out that he couldn't monetize it, basically he pulled the funding, and he subsequently sabotaged his work, because in reality, the inventions that, because Albert Einstein, someone asked Albert Einstein, what is it like to be the smartest man on the planet? And he actually replied, well, you need to ask Nikola Tesla that question. So even Albert Einstein knew that Tesla was on another level, and his inventions were, the only thing you can say is not of this world, because he understood anti-gravity. He understood how to create free energy. and not like the energy now where that there's harmful rays. It's that low frequencies where your devices would just need to have an adapter on it to channel in the energy, and the energy from his Tesla tower and the other towers that would be on the planet would just constantly charge everything. So everything would be running, at full capacity all the time without having a need for a battery, because the etheric realm is basically tapping into the consciousness field of source, right? So you're actually pulling into source. So that's why I was asking if you have come across Nikola Tesla, because his work, I think, is absolutely groundbreaking, and it's a pity that all of his work has basically been taken away from humanity. The FBI took these 46 boxes, and then some three-letter agency, which is faceless, took those from the FBI. So we don't know, and we know that they've reverse engineered a lot of his technology, certain things, like there's this weapon that they use, which is active system denial, basically, which is based on his technology, where when they shoot out a beam of energy, it causes the molecules in your body and the atoms to vibrate at such a high speed that it feels like your skin is burning. So that is reverse engineering some of the technology that Tesla had, but for malevolent purposes. So yeah, I think you should channel him.
I definitely am going to now, and I wonder too if he's a part of the party, because the party is not just those 12 people that I channeled back in '98. It's an incredible amalgamation of souls who are attracted to this mission that we have about world peace. Because Einstein did say at one point not too long ago that the future is that we all have these very small energy, like Tesla-like energy units that fund all of our energy, free energy. And so I'm wondering if Tesla, because of what happened with him in life, if his preference is to work behind the scenes and get this information, like Einstein, I'm sure, visits scientists and many other people on the planet to help influence them, not as directly as me saying I'm channeling Einstein. So I will look forward to doing that, to channeling Tesla and seeing the answers to all those questions.
Yeah, I would love to hear about it, because he is some of the way that I think is based on what he said, because he says that humanity will only unlock the keys to the universe when they think in energy, frequency, and vibration. Now, in reality, they're the same thing, but just expressing themselves in slightly different ways. Because you hear this in these religious texts. It says that in the beginning there was God, and then the word became God. So God is an energy, right? And then the word is a vibration. And then that vibration is actually a certain frequency, because the earth vibrates at a certain frequency, which is called the Schumann resonance. So this is why if the Schumann resonance were not to be on earth anymore, we would all go mad, because literally is what kind of keeps us, it actually keeps us sane, because in the International Space Station, if they don't pump the Schumann resonance in there, the astronauts will go mad. So it's really one and the same thing. So because of that thought process, I tend to look at a lot of things in terms of through those scope. So, and this also confirms that looking at the fruit of the tree, because the energy coming from there, you would know who and what it is,
Well, I wonder too, because humanity, a human, we are the product of all of this. We are created, even as you and I are sitting here speaking, if you look at our Einstein's map, there's a gravitational wave that's flowing from the center of the planet to the surface of the planet, creating this lens of the physical world, and it goes out into the heavens and hooks up with the Earth's electromagnetic field and goes back down into the center of the Earth. And he says from the North Pole to the center of the Earth this is like a black hole. And Brian Greene, who is a famous physicist, string theory, has just recently come out with this posit that, yeah, we are actually operating inside of a black hole. But if you think of this model, that there's this, like you said, in Einstein's term, compassion as the fifth fundamental force impels energy to step out of the nothing and into the everything and create a circular membrane domain. We call it a compilation of consciousness that surrounds all of the mathematics that are going to be what's in the lens, the trees and our bodies, and specifically mine, yours specifically yours. It aligns it to true north like a compass. So there's a compass that draws circles, a compass that aligns, and then sends out this gravitational wave that bursts through and creates this lens. First, my body, and I'm projecting, I'm perceiving. And so we are actually the most powerful structures on the planet, we ourselves. So maybe the future is tapping into our own connection to that electromagnetic energy that's flowing and doing, and this is what Jesus said, right? What I do, you can do. And he somehow mastered that theory, I think. So it's really exciting to think about, I think.
Yes, I agree. And when he said it's the fifth element, it sounds very much like it is the consciousness of love, because he calls it compassion. But I guess you can, because compassion is actually a derivative of love. And everything is based in love. Creation is based in love. It's through the act of love that a baby is created. It's supposed to be in most situations, but originally that's how a baby was supposed to be created. And then you can't manifest, you can't create, you can't attract unless you're in that state of love. So with that being said, is that very much aligned with what is termed now the Christ consciousness?
Well, I think so, but also just to step back to compassion as the fifth fundamental force, is that it's love. There's three things that this compassion that Einstein is suggesting does. And it's the first two are about the root of compass, what a compass does. One type of compass is a thing that draws circles, right? So compass impelling energy to create these circular domains. Another compass aligns to true north. So another impact is that. But the third thing is that it infuses all of this energy with the self-knowledge that we are all one being. So that's kind of the more traditional idea of love being the root. But the other two are kind of more mathematically, scientifically oriented, which is what I love about it all. But I'm with you, is that you can't really have this true power that I'm talking about, where if we could tap into our own power, we wouldn't even need energy devices. But we can't do that without that love, that classical, we're working for the good of the whole organism. And instead of what's going on, we see today, where in Einstein's definition of evil is making decisions for the good of the few at the expense of the many. And that's kind of what happens. And you don't really get real power. You get whatever it's called, whatever it is, it's degenerative, right? It's destructive instead of regenerative.
So how do we get into that state? Like what processes are there? Because I try to, like, one of the things that I am very much about is solutions. And how can we, because I've had people message me, ask me, but Todd, you talk a lot about love and doing this and doing that, but you know what I mean? I'm now starting out this. I have no clue really what you're talking about. How do we get into a state of love? And what is love?
Well, I'm going to share our Einsteinian view of being what we call aligned to compassion.
Okay.
And that is real basic. We have these what we call three human dimensions that we work with. They're sort of like the spiritual organs: emotion, intuition, and intellect. And like the heart and the liver and the kidney, they all have a different function. You treat them differently. So if your intellect is in balance, you treat it one way. If your emotions are in balance, you treat them another way. And if we're aligned to compassion, compassion is flowing up through us, hitting our emotional state, our emotions, in the solar plexus where we hold them, flows up into the heart where the intuition is always impelling us to take the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole. That's the voice of God within us, and everybody has it. But then it flows up into the intellect, and the intellect is designed to help us have this physical experience. So it's the intellect that's saying, this is a water can and that's a computer, and so it's defining things. But the power to make decisions has been situated in the intellect. You don't make a decision with your intuition. Your intuition is telling you what step to take. And the intellect, as the divine masculine, is supposed to take that step. But we've been giving the power to say no to our intuition. And we've all had this, you intuitively, your body is telling you to rest. And then your intellect says, I can't rest. I've got a million things to do. And it makes the decision to go off and do these million things. And then you're tired and you're discouraged and you get sick and conflict is arising. So Einstein says every single manifestation of conflict around us originates between this voice of God within us of intuition impelling us for the next step. And God knows the whole picture. We don't. And getting to the intellect that says no to our intuition. And so if somebody says, well, what really is this state of love? That's kind of what I like to say, is that we train our intellect to be in present moment. You're noticing, you're looking, you're in the moment, but it's always listening for what the voice of God within us is impelling us to do. And then it faithfully does that impelling from God and manifests whatever that is. And so that's what we train in conflict revolution, is how to do that on a regular basis, and I love what you say about solutions, because when we do that, what we get is intuition telling us the most creative solutions that we couldn't think up. It's like when I said to Diana, this is brilliant. And she says, yeah, I know, we're not in charge. It wasn't our idea. So the voice of God within us has all of that knowledge of what we should do next. Are we going to be the faithful servants to what is that birthright within us?
That's interesting. And there's something I picked up that I never actually thought about until just now. What you're describing are the second chakra, fourth chakra, and the sixth chakra, 2, 4, 6. Now, I know that these, because I'm into sacred geometry and numerology, gematria, etc. Not to a very high level, but they resonate with me. And there's one thing that is very clear to me, is that there's certain numbers in sacred geometry that really matter. 2, 4, and 6. But I didn't understand. So basically, the second chakra you're saying is where the feeling comes from, the emotions are kept, right?
Emotion.
Right. And then the fourth chakra now is the heart. That's your intuition. And then the sixth chakra now, which is the pineal gland, the third eye, that there now is basically the masculine. That is the way you perceive the world, you view it. So this is the one that makes the choices based on the information it's receiving. So then
Yes.
You're saying then that if to really be in a complete love state, you have to have those, well, I mean, you have to have all the 7 chakras balanced, but these, for his theory, having the second, the fourth, and the sixth in alignment means then that you're able to definitely get the harmony and balance. And if one then is out in terms of like, if you're only using your emotions to make choices, then your emotions can be manipulated, which is what we saw with the whole pandemic shenanigans, right? They played on our emotions to get us to do things to ourselves that weren't really beneficial to us. Then you could play with the intuition. If your intuition is off, where you're definitely getting these signs, and you know what I mean, it may be in a symbol, it may be in a number, whatever it is, and you're just blatantly ignoring it, then obviously you're going to make wrong steps. And then if you're overthinking it, where you're only using logic, because sometimes logic can't see that there's something underlying, which is where the third eye is supposed to pick up. But if it is polarized in one direction, you're going to miss the underlying intuitive feeling that something is not right. So have I explained it correctly, that this is really what it is?
That's exactly what it is. And it's like Einstein says, all of the conflicts in the whole world, if you're getting down to each individual, because if you're involved in a conflict, your root is within you, is between the intuition, which is never wrong. Intuition is the voice of God. It knows it's working for the good of the whole. It knows it's one big organism. But when it moves into the intellect, if the intellect says no, that's the conflict. That's where the root of every single conflict that lies. You can analyze the external circumstances of the conflict, but it's in that imbalance where the conflicts originate. And so the solution is to, like with the pandemic, people had that fear. It came up. Intuition was maybe telling people to take steps that were going to be good for them, but the intellect was seeking outside itself for a voice of authority based on a fear. And the fear was marrying to thoughts like, oh my gosh, I have to get the shot, otherwise I'm going to die, instead of your body can heal itself, or whatever intuition is going to tell us. And then we go and make decisions from that place and manifest that conflict.
Okay, so this is very interesting. How are you able to determine when it is an intuition or maybe just a feeling? Because we know that feelings can be manipulated. So how are you able to explain to someone how they can tell the difference between just your raw feelings, or if this is like an intuition where it's telling you, don't do this? Because as I said before, the media was able to manipulate our feelings, so which made us make bad choices. How can you tell the difference between the two? And are there any sort of signs that are like, definitely this is one or the other?
Well, first of all, you have to define them. Like the heart does one thing and the stomach does another thing. So you don't confuse those two things. So emotion with a capital E is really on Einstein's scientific level. It's the primordial soup of creation. And we want the whole range. You know, we want to be able to move through our bodies, everything, not just the good ones, not just the higher ones. But what happens is they move up our body and they go into intuition and they inform intuition. So if you're angry or you're scared, it's going to come up and intuition is then going to be informed by that to tell you the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole. And what happens is, so not so much between emotion and intuition, but between intuition and intellect. What we do now, or the old way of relating, is that emotions flow up through us and they marry to these thoughts, right? You get scared and it overtakes you, and then it marries to this thought, oh my gosh, I have to take the vaccination in order to be safe. So what we do is we separate out thought, intellect, from pure emotion. Emotion has no thought, it has no explanation, it has nothing but that pure energy, fear, love, pain. It's the intellect that...
So Barbara was having some connectivity issues while we were recording this podcast, so she got kicked out of our Zoom call, so apologies for that. However, I would like to take this opportunity to tell y'all about the great news that we have. We just started a merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. So we have some great designs in tank top, t-shirt, hoodie, and sweater. So head over to the Todd and Me store on Amazon, which helps support this podcast and also helps us to upgrade and get better equipment. Link is in the bio of this podcast. So thanks for supporting this podcast, and back to the show.
So to understand what your emotion really is and deal with it very independently and understand what intellect is and get control of that. So when we break those two apart and we move emotion with our breath and not analyzing, not thinking, that can re-trigger us, and just move it with our breath, move it through our body. That also weakens the ego's need to control and take control. And intellect can be more like that divine masculine. That's just waiting for that intuitive message to do the bidding of the voice of God within us.
Okay, that makes total sense, because basically, like, I have found that, like, in my own journey, I've been trying to, I've tried. I mean, I'm a lot better now in trying to understand which one is it, because sometimes, like, you have a feeling about something, but it's hard to understand, okay, is this feeling because it's like from the ego side, or is it this feeling that I should be doing this and doing that? And what I've realized is that in reality, we tend to know the difference, but it's just that is what we want it to be. So we are attached of what we want it to be than how it really is. And I find that this is very applicable to today in terms of like relationships, where like we tend to see, okay, well, people may not be so good for us, but because we have this feeling for them, that feeling, which is down bottom, which is that raw feeling that you have, we tend to overlook what the intuition is saying, what the heart is saying. The heart is like, but you know what? This person doesn't really add value to me, or they're very negative in their way of being. But because of the feeling in the lower level, you bypass what the knowing, which is more the fourth chakra, which is more the heart, which is, it knows, well, no, this isn't really good. And then what happens now, that basically that by the feeling jumping over the knowing, you make the choice then to pursue that person, even though you know that they're bad for you. So it's,
Well, this is a good example. So you meet someone, there's this big emotion, right? Whatever it is. And that moves up, and maybe and this is how we determine if it's intuition. Intuition is a small, impelling statement. So it's not an analysis. It's telling you to take a step. So it's a small whether it's a statement or a chicken skin or however it is. Small, it's impelling you to take a step, and it's one step. Intuition is not here to tell you if you should get involved with somebody because in the next 5 years it's going to be this and this. It's always about this next step into present moment for the good of the whole. So it's a small impelling statement telling you to take the next most advantageous step for the good of your whole system. So if this big feeling is coming up and it's moving up through, and intuition is saying something like, don't, right? And that's what you're saying. You meet this person, you know they're not good for you, so intuition is saying, don't. And it moves up into the intellect, and intellect is saying, don't, but that feeling means this. It means they're my soulmate. It's so strong, I know, and it analyzes, and then it makes the decision to get involved. And then it's probably great at first, and then it all comes crashing down. At least that was in my life. That's how it was. And then you look back and you say, oh, I knew that wasn't going to go. Well, in a bigger kind of spiritual sense, if you had the capacity to not, when intuition said don't, you would have. You would have said, it was really nice to meet you, and you would have gone on your way. But you didn't have that capacity. So you were learning that capacity, because every single situation in life is this opportunity. So does that make sense? Wait.
Yeah, it makes sense. It is really challenging, because I have found that in my life, because, what should I say? Because I walk a certain path, I find that it is really difficult to communicate with women, in the sense of like, when you start to walk this path, and this is a message for both men and women out there, because we're all the same. You find that if people are not aligned with you, it's extremely difficult to form any sort of relationship, whether it's a business relationship, a sexual relationship, a platonic French relationship. Is extremely hard because the values aren't really aligned, the consciousness isn't aligned, the way of being isn't aligned. And because I get messages, I've gotten messages from guys and girls where, because of the pandemic, it has put a lot of stress on their relationship, and things that they didn't realize were there, and it's caused a lot of division. And what happens, in terms of me now, where like I meet people, you know, I see that cycle as well, where like, in the beginning is all great and everything, but then as time starts to go on, you start to realize, and it's like, because you've had that feeling in the beginning, no, that seems to be the what you're basing everything on. You only go back to that. You're seeing these things where they're not alignments, and is really challenging to be able to say, okay, well, there's really nothing here, and you tend to keep trying to replicate or get back that initial feeling that you had. So it's like, sometimes okay, I shouldn't say sometimes, what to do, but it's sometimes really hard to actually follow through on it, because the feeling that you have in there, with just the raw feeling, it is really powerful, and it is extremely hard to use some sort of intuition and then logic to say, well, no, you need to leave that behind. So how do you, or how would you advise people to handle situations like that? Because feelings are powerful, man. Like Saint Germain says that feelings are one of the biggest creative powers that you have. So how do
Mm-hmm.
you master them, I should say, is the question.
I think part of it is, first of all, to remember that being human it's one of the most difficult things that there is, because we have this need to connect with each other, and yet so oftentimes we connect and then it falls apart. And so to be this really strong individual who is so rooted in compassion, in their own compassion from themselves, that is so sure that intuition within them is the voice of authority, that is like an ascended master. So what I've taken to do for myself, because I'm like that too, is, first of all, everyone doesn't have to sit in my inner circle. Like, everyone I meet doesn't have to be like this person. People, I can love them out here. They can have way different values, especially like in this political environment where everybody's so contentious. I don't cut people off for being this way or that way. But, if you're that way, you might sit out here where I can love you a little easier because you're a little farther away and I don't have to be so close to you. But in that intimacy of trying to find that deep partnership, and that deep, whether it's a love relationship or just a friend, those are the biggest challenges that we have. And the power of being able to be alone, not lonely, although, sometimes, but to really be strong and alone, and that your well-being is the first and foremost job that you have, is to take care of you and not looking for somebody else to take care of you. I think that changes things, because when we're always seeking outside ourselves for that person who's going to complete us, then we end up doing that a lot. But when we complete ourselves, we attract to us people who are complete too. So instead of looking at each other and having drama, we each are turned outward, full human beings, maybe holding hands, and then the world is the drama that we're here to live together and have these creative solutions and these loving experiences. But man, it is hard. There's just no way around it.
Where does that come from? Where does that come from? Is it because of our psyche? Is it just because we're human? I've tried to ask myself a lot, like, why is it that we have this inert thing to want to connect with others? And it takes great discipline to actually like not partake and to focus on yourself. So where do you think it comes from?
I think it's part of the evolution of humans. You know, when we were really back in the Stone Age or whatever, things were much, much more difficult, but they were simpler. You had the family. The man went out and got the food and protected the family. The woman had the kids and fed the kids and raised the family. And then we turned into these evolved beings who suddenly weren't in a family unit, didn't have that kind of, you know, that security of our immediate family unit that relied on each other for survival. Now the family units were breaking apart, and you know, women came about, like women's lib, and they had to break apart from the family, and now we see this huge disintegration of the family through kind of all the medical transgender stuff that they're doing, and we're being rained upon, I think, like they're trying to break up the family. But I think if we have that real true family unit, we can lose some of that aloneness and have that support system. But if we don't, like, I don't really have a family. My parents are dead. Everybody's gone. It's just me. And yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges we have. And I think that's why, because compassion, the third thing about it, is that impels us to understand that we're all one big organism. We're all one family, one being that are meant to be together. And this is a big challenge right now, I think, for society, for humanity.
I agree. It's a huge challenge. And I find that it is even more challenging when you've had a spiritual awakening and you do the sort of things that you and I do, this work. It's very challenging. It's very rewarding, but it's very lonely. You're not alone, but it's lonely. And
I agree.
I don't know what is the main solution, but what I will tell you what I do. I have like 1 or 2 moments during the week where I do wish I had someone. And what I do is when that moment comes, I let the feeling occur. You know, if you feel down, because like Saint Germain says, you just allow the experience to happen, right? And then it will go, and then afterwards you get back to doing what you're doing. And that has sort of like kind of like been helping me to manage it, because, and I also keep myself really busy, so I don't really have much time to entertain those thoughts, because, you know, humanity is at a precipice, on the precipice of something really, really great or something really, really bad. And it is our choice now, because we across the globe, birth rates are under the 2.1 that it needs for us to self-replicate. There are only a few places in Asia and Africa where those numbers are higher than the 2.1. But in the developed world and in the West, for sure, we're under that 2.1. Some countries are like 1.8, 1.9. It's kind of bad. And we don't have the social dynamics between men and women is one of the strangest now, where we have the rise of things like OnlyFans, which has put a massive strain on relationships, in the sense of the energy that's being put out by these girls is attracting other girls to want to aspire to be like that. But the thing is that fast money leads to slow problems, because I was talking to one girl recently, and she was trying to get me to join her OnlyFans, but I was like, hell no, But I used the opportunity to talk to her in a way to find out the psyche. And when I brought down certain things to her, she said to me, I didn't really think of it like that, right? I said, well, this is why I'm using this opportunity to maybe make you look at certain things, because she messaged me out the blue, wanted to talk to me and this and that, etc. And I knew straight away what it was about. But instead of me being a total, unmannerly and rude, I used the opportunity to try to understand the psyche. And I realized that a lot of the times they don't really know why they're doing it. It's just because everyone else is doing it. And as we say in Barbados, it's like follow pattern. People are just following because it's there. And there needs to be some sort of like a shift where we have positive role models of women setting examples of how women should be. Then on the flip side, we need to have men stop supporting these actions through our pocket by not paying for them, because the women are becoming very masculine and then the men are becoming very feminine, and men are addicted to screens just like women, but ours is in the form of paying for these girls on OnlyFans. So the girls don't actually respect the boys, and the boys are just seen as a commodity for resources. And then there's this whole imbalance where it's like, when no one actually knows why they're doing what they're doing and what they're doing. And it was mad, because when I asked her certain questions, it was almost like she didn't realize. I said, but you do know that most men won't really take you seriously? She said that it's not for everyone. I said, but well, let me put it this way. A man of value and substance that knows himself, knows what he wants, knows what he will tolerate, is not going to want to have you as a potential mate, right? And it's only then that sort of like, it was like, huh, really? Okay. And I think that we need to have someone to sort of like speak to both genders to make them realize that if we keep going down this path, then the whole transhumanism thing is going to come in, because it's coming in through the transgender, where's the confusion? And then men are not doing their roles and women are not doing their roles. And we're on the precipice of something really great or something really, really grave. This is how I see it.
Yeah, and don't you think, I think like Andrew Tate, are you familiar? Yeah, he addresses a lot of that. And I think that's one reason why they want to take him out, is
Absolutely.
because he pushes that. But for just the regular, I went to see Andrew Tate actually when I was in Bucharest. I dropped him off an Einstein book. So I never got to meet him, but
Nice.
but I think what you're doing and what I was thinking about this morning about how, I was on Jimmy Dore and I was on Tucker Carlson, and I'm going to keep getting this message out, but it's really the very people that we come face to face with, one person at a time, like that girl that you were talking to. That is so important. If that's just one person that you can have go, wait a minute, what? Who knows what seed, you turned her this way. And that's huge. One person is huge as a universe. So we can't underestimate what we can do just in our own separate universes, without thinking that we're not making a difference because we're not reaching the whole world or what have you.
Yeah, it's true. And one of the things that and Saint Germain is very much about this, where he says that you need to basically fix yourself, because you can't expect to fix the world if you don't fix yourself. And this is why I tell people, I can't change the world, but I can change myself. And in me changing myself, I can change the world because of how I interact in the world, right? I need to be in the world, but not of the world. And this is why I communicated the way I did with that girl, because I find that it's very easy to sort of like judge people and to be very harsh. And I said, you know what, let me try a different approach altogether, because I could have been very arrogant, like, how how could you even dare to ask me to want to join your OnlyFans, right? But I said, you know what? Let's try something different and a different mode of communication. And I was actually surprised that with some of the replies I got. So what I would say to people is that we need to really focus on how we act and interact with people, because when things are said to us and we react, it is very much from a place of where we are in our spiritual evolution and consciousness. Because you can't give someone something that you don't already have. So if you don't have compassion and kindness inside of you, you're not going to be able to give compassion and kindness to a potential mate. Because what I find is that a lot of us, including me, I have gotten involved with women because I was looking for that completion, instead of me realizing that I have to complete myself. Because it's in me completing myself, then the person that will come into my life will be a person that is on their way, interested in being on their way, or is there already, right? One of those three. Instead of we chasing after things that we know deep inside of us are only going to give us problems and I don't want to say toxic, but cause a lot of arguments, and there's no, I mean, it's always fine to have, it's okay to have discourse, but you don't want to be having discourse where, is very heated and is always like this clashing. And I find that there seems to be this sort of like competition at the moment between the sexes, when we are not the same. We are of equal value as a human being, but men and women are not the same. Men have certain roles they have to do. They have to protect, they have to provide, they have to create that space of security so the woman can step into that space to be vulnerable, so that she can teach the man all these higher levels of consciousness. Because when you go back to scripture, even the book of Joshua, Adam tells his son Seth that it was your mother Eve who taught me consciousness. She's the one that taught me that the God in the Garden of Eden was not the creator of the universe, right? Then you go to stories like Pistis Sophia, where Pistis Sophia came in to Eve to protect her from the violation of the archons. And the reason for that is that because she represented the divine feminine, which is the teacher, right? So this is why women, for the most part, were teachers, because they're the ones that teach the kids, right? The man provides the structure, the order, the protection, and the woman is free to be able to teach the kids, please, thank you, no, sir, no, yes, sir. These sort of manners, like, these things are lacking now in our society, and it is absolutely mad. We have like so many girls now that don't even want to have children. It is like, I mean, when I was younger, 20 years ago, most girls you would hear say want to have children. Now, 20 years on, most girls don't want to have children. And I'm like, how did we get here so quickly, right? So I really do like people like Andrew Tate. I don't agree with 100% he says, but the vast majority, oh yeah, definitely. Because I think that we don't have role models for both men and women. And me as a man, my view is that men actually have to take responsibility for actually teaching the women how they should be through our actions. So we don't give our energy, resource, and time to those girls that don't matter, right? Then they would realize, well, hold on a minute, I'm not getting a mate because of my way of being. And men are the ones that create the society. This is our job. We're the ones that went to war and fought and created society, and it's our job to maintain it. It's not the woman's job. So all you guys out there, you got to get fit, get into the gym, start working on your mindset, start reading books, listen to podcasts like this. Start to work on yourself to realize that you have to be the man that you have to be to attract the mate that you want, so you can create the society collectively as we want. Because I put all the blame on the men, all of it, because women follow the men. Men are the ones that lead, and then she's the one that says, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Can you consider that? Or if we go into a meeting, you know what, Todd? I don't like, there's something about that guy that I don't really like. That is the role of the woman, her intuition, her knowing. She complements the man. And then he can say, okay, let me investigate, right? Because a king takes counsel, right? So there's a balance between being a great leader, listening to counsel, which is in the form of the woman, and then looking to see, okay, does that make sense or not, right? So that's why I put all the blame on the men. So I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Well, I don't like to blame anybody, but I do agree with that structure. And if you take it into the microcosm, which is what we do, you know, everything outside is reflected. What you just described about the family, the woman is there to be the intuitive, to take care of the children. And if you think of the children as your emotions are your children that are being birthed, that are coming up, that have needs, that are informing the needs, coming up into the intuition, which is that mother, that divine feminine saying, this is how we're going to take care of these needs, sending that message to the intellect, and the intellect has to be doing exactly what you're doing. It's listening for that intuitive impelling. It's making sure that the external world is going to be safe for this to come through. And I think conflict revolution is what teaches us that. It teaches us this enormous self-care. It's just radical self-care that then can reflect into the environment. And I just want to say one more thing is that you just said a very famous psychic sorority phrase that we've said for 30 years, which is you can't give what you don't have. If you do not have this strong inner core, the strong self-love, and it's kind of altruistic in the sense that we're in the world to serve the world, to be of service to the world, to spread love in the world, then you can't get it either. And it's just kind of a vicious cycle of, I wouldn't say masturbation, but you know, it's just kind of doesn't get us where we need to go. So it all begins within us.
Yeah, it creates this cycle of debauchery, which is
That's
basically
it.
what we have. And you know, I wish I had known these things 20 years ago, to be honest with you. But
Yeah, me.
but now that I know them, this is one of the things that I do on my platform, where I try to tell men that look, the life of a man is very hard. We are the ones that we have to go there and provide the resources, provide the protection, provide the security. And you take that job and that role and responsibility very seriously, because I think that one of the things, I mean, there are a lot of factors for it, but I would just keep it at a high level to say that once men take their roles seriously, I think that most women of value that are looking for a demand that can provide that would realize, hold on a minute, this guy, he's that thing, right? Because we as men, we need to start to realize that we need to set the example for our daughters, because our daughters are going to pursue the type of men that we are to them and to their mothers. So regardless on if you and your child mother are together or not, you have to treat her in a way that your daughter says, hold on a minute, well, even though my parents are not together, he treated my mother well, he treated me well, he did his job, protected, provided, gave security, he was there, right? Because it means then that when she gets older, she's going to look for that type of a mate. And then on the flip side, the boys now will see how you treat the mother, your wife or girlfriend, how you treat your daughter. So they know you set the example for that. So this is why I tend to be a little bit biased, because I'm a man, that I say that is really the man's job to do that. And the woman, her special power is intuition, teaching, guiding, and keeping that balance where it's like, because we don't see everything, because we're so logical, right? That sometimes that logic doesn't make sense, and there's some things that you can't explain. It's just this gut feeling that don't go in that room, don't go down that street. And this is where we need to have that complement,
Well,
So,
and when women are so strong and intellectual, and it becomes a power struggle rather than a cooperative relationship. So yeah, I can't blame men completely, but I think they are, and what you're saying is absolutely true. For me, my father was horrific with the kinds of abuse he rained upon me, and I'm not sure that, because some of it was sexual, I'm not sure that I'll ever get over those patterns because they're so deeply were ingrained in my body. But I certainly have learned how to self-love. I may not ever have a relationship again, and I'm kind of okay with that. I had enough of them, seeking after my father, so to speak. But I think there's a lot of hope these days for young people who aren't, maybe they're more confused because the times are so confusing and the families are so splintered. But I'm hoping out of that confusion will come this sort of new, like the woman, they get a little bit of information that they never had before, and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, and they have just as equal opportunity to have a spiritual awakening as any of us walking on the planet. So that's my hope.
yeah, mine as well. So tell me, like, your conflict revolution. Tell me a little bit more about that and how we can use it to sort of like empower people to improve the world that we live in and improve themselves.
Well, for me, it's a daily ritual. It's not even a ritual. It's just it's an awareness that I have of when I wake up in the morning and I say my prayers of gratitude. Thank you for another day of the most amazing life I ever could have dreamt up. And then I'm always sort of a witness to myself as I'm going throughout the day. Like, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What is intuition impelling me to do? And that's, what intuition is impelling me might take a little more, like, you stop, take a breath, kind of clear your mind and listen to that impelling. So you have to maybe have a little more sacred space to find it sometimes. But if we monitor ourselves throughout the course of a day, and like the guy who flipped me off from the car and the other day, and my first thought was, of course, wanting to flip him back. But as I was watching myself, I thought, I don't want to be that person. And so I went, and did it make a difference? It did to me. I became somebody who was not perpetuating it. And we're so caught up in the externals. It's just the nature of reality. Like, we're projecting the whole universe from ourselves. So there has to be some projection, but our inner world is what really dictates how our relationship to the outer world will be. So conflict revolution is just that. And then when we get triggered or we're in a conflict, and we've all been there, we get obsessive. Well, he just doesn't respect me, or, she was so rude, or we have a way of parboiling down all our thinking, because, the thoughts are like wild horses. They can run off on a million things, imagination. So we use our witness to say, wait a minute, let's parboil this down to one simple idea. What is the conflict about? Well, she doesn't respect my time, or whatever. Now that's my soundbite. Now, when I get up, I'm going to be watching, okay, where don't I respect my time? Where don't I respect somebody else's time? And then that's my domain. That's where I have control. And when we get to I call it the aha moment of, what is this? I had a soundbite once in a conflict. It was I worked at a nonprofit, and I had this marketing manager who always gave me her work to do, and then she criticized me for it. It's like, what? She makes me do her work and then she criticizes me for it? I never do that. Well, took me 2 weeks of going, where do I do that? And watching myself. And I finally called a friend, here's my soundbite. And without hesitation, she said, remember when you and your husband were having all that trouble and you left him and he paid the rent? He changed the storm windows. He took care of the dog. He did everything. He remained faithful to you. And all you could say was, he didn't support you. And my aha moment was really profound. And I went to my husband, my future ex-husband, and as I call him, we're still really good friends. And I had to say, I just have to make amends for that. And it really deepened our relationship. And the next day I went to work and the manager was fired. She had gotten fired. So when we do this work inside and we take that responsibility for our own stuff, and then we find the creative solutions to how to get back into alignment, stuff manifests around us that we couldn't go straight at. It's really miraculous. It's a really miraculous process.
That's very, very interesting. And I'll be honest with you, right? I think like that a lot when people behave in a certain way with me. And I ask myself, but why it is I can see that they're only reacting in a way that they've been treated and not looking to see where that's coming from? Because what's happened to me is I've had several repeat patterns in my life. And one of the things that I am very strong on is my word and honoring my word. And what it is now is that, like, I find that when I see people that behave in a certain way or very, very argumentative and very, in terms of like women would be masculine, or even like in terms of like honor, like being up on time or just doing what you say you're going to do, I have realized that in the past, I have actually done all of those things to other people, and those things are actually coming back to me now. So the thing is now is that what I find difficult is that, okay, because I am aware of those things and I work hard to be that person that honors my word, apologizes when I make a mistake, takes responsibility, etc. I find it sometimes very challenging to deal with people that are not at that level. And I kind of like scratching my head and trying to pull up my hair of like, okay, what is the next step? How do I deal with this? Because I know that this is not necessarily about me, it's really about them. So are there any techniques or tactics you can use to sort of like figuratively hold up a mirror to get that person to see, or they have to have that aha moment themselves where things have gotten so bad for them that it just drops like that? Which one is it? Because I'm torn.
Well, here's my answer is no, you really can't hold up a mirror to them. However, when we're doing conflict resolution and like you've just described yourself, all those things, like when I was describing to myself, first of all, I never make anybody do my work. Secondly, if they were going to do my work, I would be very supportive and appraising to them. And I have all these intellectual descriptions of who I am, and a lot of them are true. However, I'm a human. And there's a difference between who I think I am versus who I watch myself be when I'm actually looking for those things. I would never have found that peace with my husband had it not been for conflict resolution. And it was all true. I'm still that person who doesn't make people do my work, and I wouldn't criticize them for it. But there was this peace that I needed to find in me that marketing manager was showing me. And so the importance is, if we're triggered, somebody can come at you and do something and you can just be like kind of sitting back going, wow, hate it for them. And other people can come at you and you can get this emotional reaction and then start thinking, well, they need to learn this and this and this. That's the point where it's about you, when you're triggered by it. If you're not triggered by it, you don't have a piece to learn. You don't need to go back and find that piece that you missed, that your description of who you are is preventing you from seeing.
Let me see. So do you think then that the only way for a person to see what you've described where is actually about them is for things to get so difficult or so unbearable in their way of being that they're forced to sit down and analyze themselves, or are some people just lost?
Well, some people are going to be lost, but I know that was it for me. I mean, I had to be in such crisis before I was able to really turn myself around. And I know that's a very familiar way that people do it. But you know what? Their domain, as much as I love the world collectively, as much as I love a lot of different people, their domain is not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to wake them up. It's not my responsibility to show them anything. My domain is my responsibility. Everything about my domain. And it's so vast. And I'm so complex. And I cannot ever stop and say, hey, I don't do that. Because I don't know what kind of stuff I haven't yet dealt with from all those years I was abusing myself. You know, there's probably so much karma coming up that I need to be humble and recognize that, you know what, I'm going to get triggered and that's going to be my sign to go in and work on my domain. And when I bring that unity to me, there's far less people who trigger me. Far less people I attract who are doing crappy things to themselves. And when they do come and try to do crappy things to me, I'm much better able to say, you know what, I think I have to go, and walk out of the room, or, you know, without having a conflict or a fight, just to preserve myself, because my domain is my responsibility.
You know, it reminds me of what my mate said. And he says this all the time, that human beings never wake up unless they go through a traumatic experience. And sadly, I think he's 100% right, because for me, a lot of my major lessons, the vast majority, have come at some of the lowest points in my life, some of the most difficult points in my life. And what you spoke about just now is something that I have only been recently able to sort of like really overcome. And the way he explained is that I've read tons of books, so I have a lot of understanding and knowledge about some things, you know. But there's something that I realize is that you can read a lot, but until it becomes true in you, where it is a knowing that this is what it is, you're not going to be able to see it for what it really is. You can understand it, but not understand it. Does that make sense?
Well, and it's what Einstein says a lot. He says you can go into the library and get all these books about flying, how to fly a plane, and you can read them all, understand it. You can sit at the desk and have a fake, like, meters and levers or whatever, how to fly a plane. Not anywhere near the same as when you walk on that tarmac and get into that plane. It's just not the same. Now, you can have all that knowledge when you get into the plane, but when you go to take off, it's still a completely different set of experiences that you have to learn how to fly the plane. So the same with all these books that we read, which is not a bad thing to read all that and to acknowledge it, but it's until you get out there on the street and you're going to put those things into action that they really come to life. Yeah,
because one of the biggest distinctions I had is from a book I called The Four Agreements. Called The Four Agreements. And one of them is that don't take things personally. And I think that a lot of times this is a trigger for a lot of people, and it was for me, where when people tell you things, you take it personally. And the thing is now is that if you take it personally, it means then that maybe to some degree that thing is true, or maybe it's something that brings up a memory or a trauma or a fear in the past, and it's to try to understand which is which. And like now that I have like seen that, I felt a massive shift inside of me, and it literally just like for as long as it was happening to me in my life, I literally got up one day, and it was like I realized it, and it was like I felt a massive shift inside of me. So I want to say to people that, these things take time. It is nothing that happens in 1 month, 2 months, 5 years.
Lifetimes.
Yeah, it takes a long time, and there are always levels and layers to it. And when you overcome one thing, there's another thing that you need to understand. So it's like the onion. It's like this never-ending onion skin that you keep taking off another skin and another skin and another skin, and it feels like it is never going to end. But does it actually end, or that's when you become an ascended master and you fully illuminate?
Well, I'll tell you later. I know that a lot working with conflict resolution has reduced the conflicts in my life, which include physical illness and relationship conflicts and manifestation conflicts, probably about 75%. And that is a life that is much more aligned to spirit and living the truth than I had been even 20 years ago. But I'm still going to be doing it. I'm still going to be doing the work, and probably till the day I die, unless I become an ascended master before that. But that's not my goal. My goal is to do the very best that I can while I'm on the planet, and influence as many people by being the change and being the inspiration. And so far, so good.
I got a question, because we touched, both of us have mentioned about manifestation a bit. So like, what are some of the misunderstood things about manifestation? Because it is a term that we hear a lot, and you hear it on social media a lot. And I wanted to understand your take on what does it look like, and what are some of the misconceptions about manifestation, and why sometimes it doesn't work?
Well, on a very, very, very root level, we are manifesting our world, like through our bodies, it's being projected and perceived. So we are manifestors at the very least. But if you're talking about, like, I once wrote a paper called Why the Secret Doesn't Work and How to Fix It. I think one of the biggest manifestations is that you're only supposed to feel the good feelings, that somehow the negative or the uncomfortable feelings of depression and anger and all of that somehow stop the manifestation. And that is decidedly not true, because we need the whole gamut of emotion in order to manifest the physical world. What happens is the negative feelings then marry to the thoughts that say, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this, or this is just a bunch of bunk, or I'm not good enough. When they marry to each other, then it gets in the way. But the other thing that I had to learn kind of the hard way is we're not always supposed to manifest everything our intellects think we need and want. It just doesn't work that way. And one day I asked Einstein many years ago, because I was not being able to manifest money, no matter what I did. I was doing all the stuff. And he said, if you were manifesting money, you would not learn how to manifest without money. And at the time, my washer broke, right? And I didn't have the money to go buy a new washer, and I was whining, what am I going to do? He said, if you had money, you would just go buy a new washer. We want you to learn how to manifest it without that. And so I thought, okay, so I went back to conflict resolution, which is about feeling my feelings and not letting them marry to thoughts. And sure enough, the guy I was working for called me up. He said, yeah, I just put a new washer in that unit and I got an extra one. Do you want it? I'll give it to you. I'll even come and install it. So it's such a mystery of what we're supposed to have. And then I think there's also kind of I call it the math. Like, we come in this life, I'm a woman, I'm this age, I'm this height. Certain things are immutable. And I think there's certain mysterious things in our path that we don't know that are immutable. Like, I was never supposed to be a rock star. I mean, I spent my whole childhood and into 20 years of my adulthood on the road in music as this incredible songwriter, dedicating everything I had. And I just didn't get to that level that I thought that I was supposed to be. Was it because I was a failure, because I didn't do it right? I don't think so. I don't think I was ever. And now I'm almost 70. I look back and think, thank God, what a world. What a culture. That whole world is so unattractive to me. And I probably wouldn't have survived it back then if I had gotten what I wanted. So it's just a lot less concrete. Like, people are going to tell you, we know how to tell you how to manifest stuff. And I'm like, maybe, but maybe there's something bigger at play too.
That's interesting. I am also realizing that you manifest the things that you need, not necessarily things that you want. And there's this big dichotomy of understanding the difference between the two. And what I have realized through my own journey is that I have never lacked for the things that I needed, but the things that I want, I don't always get. And what happens is that because I don't get the things that I want, then that sort of like affects the manifestation process, because like you said, you start to have these thoughts that, I'm not good enough, or I can't get this thing done, etc., etc. And then that creates this feedback loop inside of you. And then that tends to cause you to get into the way of yourself, right? Well, no, the things that I have always needed, I've always gotten and received. And I think that there's this massive lesson that we need to learn, that we need to not, I mean, it's okay to have desires and wants and dreams and stuff. And I think it's good to work towards those things. But I think that sometimes we need to realize that the things that we want may not necessarily be right for us at this particular moment in our lives, because we may not know how to handle it. Because for people that are struggling with money, well, if you don't learn the lesson that you were explaining there, if you had all of this money, you may actually be very irresponsible, spend it doing a lot of things that don't matter or add value, or end up losing it all. So it's kind of like realizing that everything seems to be a bit of a lesson, and it's a matter of us to look to see what lessons we need to learn, because the ego gets in the way of like, oh, I want this, and because I can't get it, you throw your toys out the pram and have this hissy fit, and then you start to think like, oh, I'm not good enough, and then you start to believe that, and then that affects the other parts of your life. So does that sound about how I explained it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think people are not good at the long view. And the long view for me is that when I get to my deathbed, I'm not going to take any of it with me. What really I'm going to take with me is the sum of all my actions, is the love that I have or the hate that I have. And those things which are outside of that sort of manifestation, focus, those are really the important things. Is how do we treat people? How do we treat ourselves? How grateful were we every single day? How much did we enjoy our lives? How much did we live our lives where we were fully present? Those are such important things that have nothing to do with money or cars or any of that. And people kind of overlook that, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think that right now in this time that we're living in, all of these sort of like higher truths and greater knowledge is actually coming out, because I remember, 10 years ago, you weren't really hearing many people speak about these things, because I guess maybe it was a lack of of it not being the right time. And now seems to be the right time where people are getting energized and you know me, because I've tossed my hat into the whole podcasting feed as well. It's something that I'll be honest, I avoided for a couple of years. And now like I get to talk to really, really cool people like you, and even myself, I learned a few things today. And I think we're in a really good place. I'm actually very bullish and positive for the future. Some people, one of my mates, he thinks that I'm a bit mad because he thinks humans are doomed and we're destined to fail. But I said to him that if, say, only one man and one woman survived all of this, it means that humanity will go on and we will repopulate the planet again. So I don't think that all 7 billion people on this planet will perish. All we need is one man and one woman. As long as they're and the woman is of the age to procreate, I think that we are in good stead, you know?
I'm with you. I'm very, very optimistic. And part of it for me is that I started this work in the 90s. Okay, in the 90s, the world was pretty cool. I mean, there were wars, there was stuff going on, but in the United States, we were abundant, and world peace was something people thought was a nice concept. And so for through these years, I thought, you know, this work is so important. Nobody's listening. No, people don't even understand it. You know, what am I doing? Well, in 2024, let me tell you, people understand it. People want it. People want to know how to become the change. They want to know how to make that peace. They want to know what to do in this crazy world that could make a difference. And when you have that answer, it's like, oh, I have an answer. Try this. It's wild after all these years to suddenly have this kind of support and understanding. So I'm really optimistic, especially for you young people. I don't want to sound like I'm an old, but so many people get this. Back in the 90s, when I said emotion is at the root of the conflicts, your illnesses and stuff, people were like, what? Emotion? What are you talking about? Now it's just kind of common knowledge. So yeah, I'm with you.
So why do you think that humanity has failed to understand and to practice the teachings of the sages, the yogis, the ascended masters that have come here, Thoth, Buddha, Yeshua, Krishna? Why have we failed to grasp these concepts and higher understandings?
I don't think we have failed. I think that all around the world, as you and I speak, there are millions and millions and millions of people who get it. And that this time of revealing is, I was just talking to my psychic sorority sister, Kim, last night about when we started, you know, we had to find out in ourselves where those systems weren't working. We had to go through the breakdown of our facade lives that we built, break it all down, and then rebuild to be these authentic, loving, truly magical people that we've become. And that's what the world is doing. We have to see the Klaus Schwabs and the Bill Gates and the pandemics, and in order for us to rise up to the truth. And actually, I think the pandemic was one of, you know, it was a war for sure, but I don't think humanity is going to bow down for the next one they try on us. And I think incrementally we're building our awareness one step at a time, more and more, and that those systems are crumbling, but not without a fight.
Absolutely. And it's sort of like what's happening now is because I'm a bit of a person, I'm into scripture and I look at a lot of these ancient texts, and there's one in particular where it is in Revelation, in Matthew, and it talks about the return of the Son of Man will be as lightning strikes in the east and flashes in the west. And what that, for me, the interpretation really is the Christ consciousness. So what are your understandings about what the Christ consciousness is, and is it here?
I think the Christ consciousness is Einstein's definition of compassion. I think it is the fifth fundamental force of the universe. It is a major part of the creation of our world. I think what is happening is when Jesus came, whatever, 2,000 years ago, humanity was at this very, very rudimental place. You know, they weren't intellectually advanced. It was a much simpler time. And so he had to speak in parables to say, you know, the second coming is when humanity then comes to this place where they realize the Christ consciousness is within them and that they choose to activate it, that they choose to align to compassion, that they understand the importance of the Christ consciousness coming through us and the decisions that I make and the thoughts that I have and the actions that I take to be that loving, compassionate person that understands that these are my brothers and sisters, these are part of me. I think that's what the second coming in, and I think that's Christ consciousness has always been there. It's just our waking up to our responsibility to it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because one of the things that I've learned is that there's actually no separation from source. The separation is only in our mind. And because we are the creators of our reality, because we think that we're separated, we become separated, but it's actually an illusion. So we create this false reality and perception of separation that doesn't exist. So it's like a bit of a mist of cloud in front of us that we are not seeing the big picture. And the Christ consciousness for me is that cloud, that fog, that mist is disappearing, and we're starting to see through it, and we're like, okay, that's what it is. Because a lot of times, like, Christians come at me and say, oh, well, Yeshua said that he's coming back and there will be this rapture and we'll be saving and this. But I'm saying, but guys, like, what you don't realize is that you're putting your responsibility to do the work on yourself on a character who said, I am not coming back. He says, if they say that I've returned and I'm here and I'm over there, don't believe them, right? But what he is saying is that the Son of Man, which he said, I have not come to judge, but I've reserved judgment for the Son. And the Son is all of us. Collectively, we're the sons of man. So basically what they're saying is that we judge ourselves. We're the ones that save ourselves. We're the ones that become the Christ. And the way Einstein calls it is compassion. The way I look at it is that it is realizing that we're one, right? Which merges into that, but it's like this truth has so many different sides, and both of us are saying the same thing, but just slightly from different sides. And one side will resonate with some people, and another side will resonate with some people. But in reality, we're saying the same thing, and we're trying to do the same thing and accomplish the same result. So I think that what we need to do is just have more unity, and with that, we can push back against these systems of oppression, because we are in a definite war. It's a war for our consciousness. And the only way to win that war is to realize that we need to start loving ourselves, because it is through the hate for ourselves is why we hate our brothers and sisters.
Exactly. You know? And you know, if he came back, we'd kill him.
Most likely. Most likely. This is the mad thing, because even if Yeshua were to come back, let's say he did, no one would even believe anyway. Most people. So, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But I think that I have certainly, because I've been speaking out like this for 2 years now, 2.5 years, and I've seen a huge difference in 2024 than I saw in 2022. And that's just 2 years. So I can only imagine what it was like for you in the 90s. But for me, my experience, it's been surreal, because that's the reason why I actually like decided, okay, I'm gonna start this channel and talk to people like yourself, because I want to get all the different takes and these sides. Because what it is now is that, like Christ says, my flock will hear my voice. But because we're one flock, it means that we have many different shepherds, but all the shepherds are doing the same job. We just need to get more people to align with the people that particular thing resonate, and we're all walking together to the same place, which is to become one and to unify. And that is my message, and something that I talk about a lot. And with that being said, I would just like to say thank you very much for coming on to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. It was a very, very interesting conversation. Very different from the conversations I normally have, but I'm very versed in all these type of areas. And my favorite is the Anunnaki and the systems of control. But sides like this are also very important, because I think that it gives people some deeper understanding that we do have to do the work on ourselves.
Yeah.
And as I said, and you echoed, you can't give someone something that you don't already have. And my message to everyone today listening is this is the time to pick up your cross, put it on your back, walk the path, and die to yourself, die to your old self, you know? Allow the universe to show you, and it's going to be scary. Trust me, it is very scary to put down the things that you think are you, but these things are just a hologram. It's a false image you've created of yourself, because you came into this world, you were given a name, you were given a nationality, and you were given a religion. These are all things that we didn't ask for, but were imposed on us. So it takes a lot of time and effort to break those chains of mental slavery. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Great conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And if you channel Tesla, you're welcome to come back on.
Now I'm going to, and I'm going to send you guys a link. And yeah, I'm on it. I'm on it. Yeah.
So do you have, can you tell the audience where to find you, and you can plug any things that you're working on and stuff like that?
Yeah, I have two different websites. One is Barbara With, BARBARA, WITH, barbarawith.com. And there I also have a column I call Breaking Formation. I'm also an investigative journalist. And so I've been doing since, 2016, but really around the pandemic, trying to help people understand the indoctrination of propaganda. And I also have Synergy Alliance .llc, and that's the whole story. That's the psychic sorority and conflict revolution and Einstein and all of my podcasts and everything. And I'm doing a meditation series this summer. We're calling it the remagnetization, where we do this meditation where we align with the Earth's, the actual Earth's energy, and while we're also learning about conflict revolution. And so and that's free. You can sign up on my websites for those. So yeah.
Yes, and links to all of those things will be in the description of this podcast, whether it's the audio version or the video version. And of course, for me, you can find me, well, as you all know, I'm an online fitness trainer, and I help spiritually inclined people burn fat to build muscle. And all of the things that we spoke about today are in my coaching, because I coach the body, the mind, and I help you to find your spirit through, some series of meditations that I give you, and also recommend some books for you. Because one of the things that I have learned is that you can't actually get into shape unless you train your mind, because getting into shape is just a representation of the work you're doing on your mind. So if you want to improve your mindset, get into really, really good shape. And you can find me on Instagram at Adriano_246, or my name, Todd Cave, on Facebook. All the links on how to find me are both in the bios of my profiles. And of course, if you like content like this, please like, subscribe, and share to the Conscious Man 7 on all major platforms: Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. They're all there. Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey. we're everywhere. So find your platform that you like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment because it helps the platform to grow and also to be recommending algorithms. And yeah, send me a DM if you're interested in getting into shape, or if you have any questions about any of the things that we discussed today. Once again, Barbara, many thanks for being a guest on the Conscious Man 7 podcast. And yeah, if you channel Nikola Tesla, you're welcome to come back and we can have another conversation.
Great. I'll look forward to it.
All right. And that would be all, folks. Thank you very much for listening. All links will be in the description of this podcast. And see you on the next podcast.